Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We are live with this very special bonus edition of the Bite Bomb Wrestling Podcast, a show that is for the fans, by the fans. I am your phenomenal host, Mr. Podcasting, Chris Belcher. Thank you so much for hopping on with us in the middle of the day on a Tuesday. We wouldn't do this if there was not breaking news. And when I say breaking news, I'm talking we just about broke the wrestling internet world this morning. But here to help me break it all down is the man who you've heard me talk about a zillion times on this podcast. He's here in the flesh. He's my CCW broadcast partner. He has a podcast. He has a blog. He has another podcast. He has another podcast. Listen, this guy's just all over the place, and we're happy to have him with us. Mr. Tyler Peters is here. What's up, man? How's it going?
Chris, I am extremely honored. This is going to be a lot of fun, so thank you for having me. What a great opportunity, man. Let's get this thing going. I'm pumped up, man.
Let's jump in, but of course we could not talk about AEW without the young buck. I'm not talking about Matt or Nick. I'm talking about Mr. Andy York, who is always in the house with us. What's up, man? How's it going?
Trying to wrap my mind around things. I am as confused as I've ever been, I think.
Oh my gosh. So of course what we're talking about, you guys have seen it in the headline, you saw it in the title. Breaking news as of this morning. Unless everybody is lying to us, Cody Rhodes and Brandi Rhodes are no longer affiliated with All Elite Wrestling. Just in looking at that, Andy, in looking at that, and you look at the lineup of all the EVPs, obviously it's easy to pick out which one is not like the other. We all kind of knew that Cody was kind of the outsider. But to hear those words actually confirmed by Tony Khan, by Cody Rhodes, and by other people, like, man, talk about the weight of that for a second. Like, I know you're trying to wrap your head around it, but holy cow.
Yeah, it's really weird. It's a really weird situation. Obviously, we don't know all the details behind everything. But I honestly, it seemed like for the last year, maybe Cody has been very disconnected from AEW. And part of it, I think, obviously they played into it in storyline wise because you had Arn Anderson kind of trying to restart things, and he was obviously busy with the hosting and everything else that he was doing, or judging and everything else that he was doing. So it seemed like it may have been somewhat true, but also may have been just being played up as storyline wise in AEW. But it seemed like he was very distant for the last year or so, and so while this comes as a shock, it's honestly not surprising at the same time as well. It's a weird mix of both in a weird way. And I honestly, it kind of floored me when I saw it this morning. I had to do a double take in my phone because I got the alert. I was like, oh, Cody's no longer in AEW. And I was like, oh, wait, Cody's no longer in AEW. Why? What is happening right now? So I think we'll get more details as things start to unfold. But yeah, it's absolutely insane right now.
Tyler, I'll throw to you next. What's your instant reaction to all this?
It makes me wonder, since it's WrestleMania season, if Cody, he's done all he needs to accomplish. If you consider Ring of Honor, New Japan, and now with AEW, if he doesn't want that moment again with WWE, at least one more run, because I feel like as solid as a run as he had as Stardust, and just as Cody Rhodes himself, there's still a lot of unfinished business with WWE. So, I know that's going to be everyone's conclusion, but I'm thinking the timing of this thing is just seeming too obvious for me. And with, a lot of the sources already saying there's been backstage talk and plans, I know you can't always believe it, but I think in this case, it makes you wonder, fellas, are we going to see maybe Cody Rhodes surprise us at WrestleMania? Maybe before then. That's kind of my conclusions. And I just think it's as simple as that. And I think, to your guys' point, it's frustration among Kenny Omega, the Young Bucks, Tony Khan, maybe differences in creative direction for AEW. So that's my takeaways on the whole Cody deal. I'm surprised, but not completely, because wrestling is just that way. I mean, if we've learned anything with releases, a lot of people have came back. Jeff Jarrett's a great example of somebody who came back, even though it went right away with WWE. Eventually, Vince McMahon's very welcoming. He's always had that reputation. And that's really my takeaways.
So I think you're both 100% right. By the way, again, like I mentioned at the top of this, we are live. We're live on the bodyslam.net YouTube channel. We're live on my personal Facebook page. We're live on the Pipe Bomb Wrestling Podcast Twitter account. Okay. So we are going to do our best to field your questions, to answer them as best we can, to read your comments. And we're going to try to get in our thoughts here. One thing that I want to bring up, Andy, you mentioned the animosity between the EVPs over the last year or so. I was texting with Cassidy Haynes of bodyslam.net. He's our go-to guy. Our inside sources of bodyslam.net has been talking about this for a long time. Cass wrote an article about the dissension between the EVPs back in September, and I've got the article pulled up on my phone right now. Not only is there dissension between the EVPs, Cody, Matt, Nick, and Kenny, but that they're not really friends. They don't hang out. There was a point in time where Cody was the only one going to any business or creative meetings, and then that stopped. And then all of a sudden, basically, the EVP just became a title, and Tony Khan took away everybody's power, and he became creative. So that was back in September. Here we are. We're coming to fruition. We got some comments coming through from Norman. He says, "Is this an extended work?" Obviously, if this is a work, Andy, if this is a work, this is AEW's greatest storyline ever. There's no question. If this is a work,
it might be the greatest wrestling storyline ever. If this is a work, because
right,
they have worked. If this is a work, then kudos to Tony Khan, kudos to Cody Rhodes, kudos to AEW for pulling this off without there being any hint of it being a work or any leaks of it being a work. So part of me is hoping this is a work. Part of me is hoping that next week we come on here, and if it's a work, then we're looking like idiots, and I want to look like an idiot from a week from now, because I think Cody Rhodes fits the AEW. He fits the AEW backstage style if his head is in the right place, and if everybody's head is in the right place, because obviously without Cody Rhodes, there wouldn't be an AEW. There would not be this company that we have come to love over the last 2-3 years. And so it would be awful to kind of see him leave. But to Tyler's point, like I can see him, and we've talked about this before.
Yep.
I don't think Cody Rhodes is retiring without returning to WWE at least one time. And I think this would be the perfect time if there was any time for him to go. I think if he does go to WWE around WrestleMania time, I think the obvious match for him is Cody Rhodes versus Triple H at WrestleMania, because there has been so many symbolisms between the two guys. And if you made me put money on the table right now, there ain't no way Cody Rhodes is winning that match. But I do think, I think there is a possibility of this being a work. I think there's always a chance of it being a work. But as of this moment right now, the chances of it actually being a work, I think, are very slim to none.
Yep.
And I really think this is more creative differences. Cody is probably tired of maybe feeling like he's doing all the work and getting no credit. Maybe Tony Khan is not happy with the way things are going, and obviously he is the money in AEW, so he gets final say in a lot of things, and it both ways it makes sense to me.
Well, money, you mentioned money. I think money's part of it too. Cody's got a family now. Who knows if they're going to try to have another kid or not. And all those kinds of things. So money could be an option. I think creative is definitely an objective there. I don't know. It just seems to me that it's wrestling, so it's obviously a work, right? Nothing is true.
Nothing
in
is
wrestling.
real.
Nothing is real, But from all the sources that I've heard from and that I've read this morning, this is legit. Like this is actually happening. And to go as far as to say this, Tyler, I'll throw to you on this, something we haven't brought up yet. In Cody's statement, he alluded to the fact that Amanda Huber will be taking Brandi's spot as the chief branding officer for AEW. So for the fact that her name got thrown out there, to me, like, Tyler, they're not going to just throw names out there for the sake of throwing names, especially if it's a work. I don't think.
I agree. I think this was all part of the plan. they talked about it and they decided, hey, we're done. This is time to write a new chapter. And Cody still, I think, got a fondness for Dusty, the way he was treated with NXT, if I'm being honest. I think there's still a soft spot, like you guys were talking about Triple H.
Yep.
I think that match can happen. But Amanda Huber would be great in Brandy's spot. I think I'm all for that. I think they were just looking for a way out. You talked about the new family. He's got the projects with the TV show. So who knows what is the real reason. But I think Cody takes it more seriously. I mean, nothing against the Young Bucks, but he's got a different perspective on how he wants to run a wrestling promotion.
Yep.
And I think if Tony Khan's going to be able to run it successfully, he had to do what he had to do, take the power away from the EVPs, because there's just too many cooks in the kitchen. We saw that. As much as a WCW fan as I was, that was their problem. They had too many people trying to go one way and not the other, and it was a disaster. So I think it just that accumulates over time, and that's what we got with why Cody and Brandi left.
Yeah, I agree. I think creative had a lot to do with it. I think, Andy, you said earlier, I'm going to push back on your point a little bit. You said earlier that you think Cody is AEW, like this is Cody. See, I don't think so. I think that him leaving is a representation of it not being him, because I feel like, because Tyler just mentioned it, Cody has a different vision for AEW than the Bucks or Kenny do. I feel like the Bucks and Kenny and Tony and those guys are kind of aligned, and then Cody's kind of like, well, wait a minute. He's the only one that came from WWE. Right. So he has that WWE perspective. I'm not saying he's trying to make AEW like WWE, but if you're going to compete with the big boys, you're going to have to beg, borrow, and steal some stuff from the big boys.
Yeah,
sure.
And I think, honestly, like when I said Cody is AEW, the fact that he, like I said, that without Cody there would be no AEW, and I think we saw him in NWA when they were in Nashville, and he was the most over guy on the entire show, the most over guy on the entire show. I think, honestly, when Cody got the power that he had in AEW is when everything changed. Is when we started to see, Cody try to do this. And I think part of it is because I think part of the issue that was with AEW and with Cody is the fact that so early on he did the thing where he wasn't able to challenge for the AEW title. Like from that point on, he wanted to book things to where he's still creatively in charge, still able to book things without making him or the other EVPs look strong. And they were the reason why we were all tuning in, was to watch the EVPs, was to watch Cody, was to watch the Young Bucks, was to watch Kenny Omega. And so I think that is where the struggle really started to come in. And I think up until last year, Cody was AEW through and through, but over the last year and a half, things have really started to change for him. And I think part of that is he had a family. Part of that is he started getting these other opportunities outside of wrestling. And when you see wrestlers get other opportunities outside of wrestling, they start to take it, and then things start to take off, and wrestling becomes secondary to them.
Well, I think to your point, we've seen AEW evolve over the last year and a half, and it's changed.
It's not the same company.
Yeah,
we have. It's not, and maybe that's part of the problem. Who knows? Again, guys, we are live on several different platforms here. My personal Facebook page, the Pipe Bomb Wrestling Podcast Twitter account, and the BodySlam.net YouTube channel. We're going to try to field your comments and questions and those kind of things. We've got a couple more minutes here before we wrap up, but we just wanted to hop on here and just give some immediate reaction, thoughts. Those things are somewhat hard to put into words right now.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I wanted to throw up, Bubbly Boy made a comment on YouTube earlier. He said the next Dynamite will be special. Well, guess what, Andy York? The next Dynamite is in Nashville, Tennessee tomorrow night. Holy cow, man. Holy cow.
I'm expecting there to be, I wouldn't be shocked if there was some Cody chance, because I think AEW fans, while
there will be,
they were sour on Cody last year, respect the fact that without Cody there wouldn't be anything. And I think we'll see that.
We brought it up in the Sammy feud especially, but it's the thing that continues to go. You can boo this man all you want, but when the dude has a microphone and he cuts a passionate promo, flips everybody.
Yeah,
just like that. And Tyler,
he's great.
To your point earlier about WWE, I think we can all agree that the guy will probably end up in WWE before his career is over with. Maybe not like with 100% certainty, but it's pretty well known fact. It just seems like it's going to happen. With the way he can cut a promo, man, that's something that's needed in WWE right now. And he would just imagine the impact that he would have if he just slid right in there.
Yeah, I think he would definitely make an impact. And I think you could still have Brandy. I'll use this comparison, not to copy it, but have her do like a Maurice, like with The Miz. I mean, because the fans are already kind of turning on them anyways. You don't have to be a carbon copy, but maybe do something similar. Because like you mentioned, Chris, and to your point, Andy, the promo skills. Cody makes you believe he can connect with the audience. And could you imagine some of the feuds they could have? I mean, there's just so many possibilities. I think that's why it's so intriguing if he makes that WWE, that one final run or that big return for however long it may be.
Right.
I mean, you've got Randy Orton. You got a lot of people he's got history with that he still could have some great matches because Orton, even on a part-time schedule, it's still possible. So,
gosh.
Yeah, that would be awesome, man.
Orton and Cody would, my goodness.
You talk about storytelling, and see, that's what I love. Both the guys come from a traditional kind of, like Shawn Michaels, man, like you've talked about, and Bret Hart, those great matches that tell the story.
My only concern with Cody going back to WWE though is the same concern that a lot of WCW fans had with guys going over to WWE, is that he's not going to give Cody the time or the chance to do anything because he started AEW, and that is my biggest concern, is because we have the chance to have these special matches, we have the chance to have all these special moments, and Vince is a business guy. Like we give Vince a lot of grief, and rightfully so, over some of the things that he has done to guys. You hear me all the time, Keith Lee. I think this is one of those times where if he does go to WWE, there's a lot of opportunity, there's a lot of chances, but will Vince's ego let him do that? And I think that's a big question. And I think Cody could get very sour in WWE very, very quickly. And 2 years from now, he's back in AEW. And I think that's a very big possibility.
I think a lot of what we're looking at, what we're seeing, is we're speculating here, guys. Yeah. We have no foundation or no sources that say that Cody's going to go to WWE. I think there's a better chance that he's hanging it up, that he's just done, that he's just done in the ring. He's not going to go to WWE. Maybe today, Cody Rhodes has decided he's done, because I don't know if you guys watch the Roads to the Top show, or those of you who are out there who are watching or listening to us watch the show, but having a baby very much changed Cody's life. Very much, because he talked with his sister and he's talked with his brother about how his dad wasn't there for them growing up. And that really shook Cody to his foundation. He wants to be there for his family. Yeah. Well, AEW, you only wrestle or at the building once a week, twice a week at most. But like Cody, we mentioned all these outside business ventures and those kind of things. Maybe it's time to just stop. And I think there's a good chance that he does that.
And I'll respect him for it too, because that's very admirable, is what I was getting at, a trait that he would do that. So that's also very possible too. I didn't think about it. Great observations, guys. Kind of helps me out too.
I think, Andy, we're saying he might retire. We're saying he might go to WWE. We're saying this may be one big coup and that he's going to stay in AEW, and then 6 months from now he's going to be a heel and yada, yada, yada. But can you imagine if they don't promote it and we're sitting at AT&T Stadium and that music hits?
I know.
Could you imagine what would happen?
I think it would be a really weird reaction, because you got to think at WrestleMania there's a lot of casual fans, and maybe some of them don't know WWE or AEW or anything, but I know for sure I would be freaking out. I know I will pop really hard. It's the weirdest thing is not 24 hours ago, but like a few hours ago, we got the breaking news about Stone Cold that could happen. And then all of a sudden here comes Cody as well. And things are in a really weird place. I will say, I think Cody, I would not be surprised if Cody retired for the foreseeable future. I think there is. I don't, because he's 36 years old, so I don't think he's.
Yep.
I don't think he's done. I
Yep.
just think he might be done until his child grows up a little, to where he's
Mhm.
able to be there for the first few years where it's really important,
Yep.
and then he can kind of go back to wrestling a little bit, kind of
Part-time.
sprinkle it in here and there, part
Yeah.
time. And I think if he does go part time, I think him showing back up in AEW, I think he would get the reception that he wants to get.
Mhm.
And I think that would be kind of the point where he would go with that. But yeah, I think if he goes to WWE at WrestleMania, I think he's going to get a really good reception. And yeah, it's going to be weird. It's a weird time we're in right now. And until we know something, I think we're going to be glued to our TV on both sides, waiting for him to show up somewhere.
Yep.
Yeah, for
And
real.
Bubbly Boy just made a comment. I was actually just getting ready to bring this up, that Dustin Rhodes oddly stays at AEW. Yeah, Dustin tweeted out a little bit ago. He said, "I'm staying. I love it here. I wish them both well, and I love them dearly." Like,
Who would have thought when AEW started that Dustin Rhodes would be not better off, but would have a better, honestly, a better overall AEW run than Cody Rhodes? Like, I know
He-
Cody had the TNT title twice or three times or however many times he had it, but he wasn't as connected as Dustin was,
right.
Dustin is, and I think that's so weird that if you'd have said that at the beginning after their amazing match, I don't think we would have sat here and said that.
Well, I'll say this, and Tyler weigh in on this as we get ready to wrap up here. I think that with Dustin understood that he was leaving his mark as far as his legacy is concerned.
Yep.
Cody's still trying to leave his mark.
Mm-hmm.
Cody's coming off of WWE. He's coming off of Stardust, no matter what your opinion is about that gimmick.
Please don't bring it back if he goes.
He's coming off of an indie run where he fulfilled some incredible dream matches. He was the NWA World's Champion. He was a champion. He was IWGP champion. Andy, is that right?
No,
champion?
he wasn't the world champion. He was
U.S.
U.S. I think.
U.S. Okay. Regardless, he made an impact in Japan when
he was
there.
U.S. He was U.S. Yep.
So, but when he comes to AEW, he's still trying to make his mark.
Yes.
To Andy's point, did he make that mark well enough that he is now satisfied that he can hang up the boots? Or, where does this kind of leave him, you think?
I don't think he has, just because a lot of wrestlers, it's hard to get it out of your system. Even if you wanted to retire and be with your family, I think there's still a lot of what ifs out there. And to me, a scenario, you're talking about WrestleMania. What if that music hits by Cody Rhodes, and before that you had Triple H and Stephanie reemerge?
Yeah.
And Triple H wanted to say, "Hey, I'm taking over NXT." Well, here's that music, and Cody and Brandi step out. I know it sounds crazy, but could you imagine the pop? I mean, it'd be wild, but it would definitely get a reaction, and you could get a feud on TV. So I think Cody Rhodes is not finished wherever he ends up, whether it's WWE or not. And like to your point, Andy, he may retire for a little bit, then get back into it. This may be just temporary. And I also think Dustin Rhodes has had a great career. He's reinvented himself. Gosh, can he still work as great as he did back in the early 90s? It's an amazing testament to his character doing those. What are those power bombs that you see Adam Cole do? And he's doing them. The Canadian Destroyer. Yeah. It's amazing. Guy 6'6" that at that size performing those moves. I'm just always astonished. So, I mean, that's what I think. Whatever happens, I don't think we're seeing the last of Cody or Brandi in some capacity. I mean, I think they'll be back.
Well, I think honestly, like I think Cody's legacy in AEW is a weird one, but you got to think he's had two of the greatest moments in AEW history. I mean, he had the greatest, to me, still the greatest AEW match with Dustin.
Yep.
And then he took the greatest cutter of all time in AEW as well. So like, he's got two of those. Like, he's got two things under his belt in AEW for sure.
Yep.
He's obviously he's had the most title reigns with the TNT Championship, and he's had some big moments and things like that. So
not to mention Brody Lee.
Not to mention getting absolutely destroyed by Brody Lee.
Yep.
And so I think it's one of those of, I think his legacy in AEW will be remembered. But will it have the same kind of hit or same kind of mark that a John Moxley will have, or a Chris Jericho, or he's been in there for a very short time. But Brian Danielson, I feel like has done more in 6 months than Cody has done his entire run.
I agree.
Or the Young Bucks as a duo.
Yeah.
So it just, on one hand, Cody got his shot to be able to run a promotion, and maybe he got run out of it. On the other hand, maybe Cody got into business with some guys he didn't know what he was getting into. So that's not to say he'll start another promotion. I don't think that'll happen, but
could you imagine if Triple H left WWE, Cody Rhodes left AEW, and they got together and started their own third promotion? I mean, I would be for it. At this point in time, I would be for it.
That'd be interesting.
That would be so incredible. Well, guys, let's put a bow on this. Let's wrap it up. Again, we wanted to get on here. There's no script. There's no nothing on this. We wanted to get in on here, get ahead of this, get our thoughts out, get our speculation out. Thank you for joining us. I know Bubbly Boy has been commenting a lot on the YouTube channel. Thanks so much for hanging out with us. And for those of you who are watching who didn't comment, what's your problem? Come on now. Make sure you follow us at PBW Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We release regular shows every Monday and Wednesday. We just dropped an episode yesterday about St. Valentine's Day Massacre, celebrating Valentine's Day. What a great show that was. We'll be dropping our regular podcast this week. Most likely, we're going to give this a day to breathe. So probably we'll drop that on Thursday. So be on the lookout for that as we preview the Elimination Chamber with this same crew right here. We're going to preview the Elimination Chamber. We're going to talk about the crazy debuts from AEW last week. Oh, my goodness. So lots of good stuff to talk about. Be on the lookout for that this coming Thursday. Again, follow us at PBW Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you're watching us on BodySlam.net's YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. That way you get notified every time that the channel goes live, whether it's us or one of the other great shows on the channel. I know they would appreciate your support as well. For Mr. Tyler Peters, our special guest, for my co-host, Mr. Andy York, my name is Chris Belcher. Thank you so much for hanging out with us on this bonus edition of the By Bomb Wrestling Podcast. We will catch you guys down the road.